Around 60 million years ago, a group of mammals left the dry mainland forever. Our knowledge about these deepest diving mammals is still restricted to the short time they spend close to the surface. Why do sperm whales have the largest brain of all living organisms in the history of evolution? What do sperm whales experience when they spend 2/3 of their life in the deep ocean? With modern computer technologies, attempts are being made to unveil the secrets of their life. Here, the water is normally pitch black and close to freezing. The water pressure is strong enough to crush a diver. Do they hunt alone or in groups? How do they react to environmental changes? All of these questions are only now being investigated. They communicate with each other through clicking sounds. Since sound is conducted extremely well in water, the animals can stay in touch at distances of more than 10 kilometers. Is this a language? Scientists are still trying to decode it. The Azores Islands, in the middle of the Atlantic. The nutrient-rich deep sea mixes with the warm Gulf Stream, creating an ideal nursery for raising offspring. For generations, the Azores were a center for whaling. The former whalers are now working with biologists. Using underwater microphones, the researchers locate the whales.
There it is. There it is. I can hear it very clearly.
Had whalers been aware of this technique 40 years earlier, who knows whether any sperm whales would still be around today? How many sperm whales still exist, whether 2 million or just 200,000, there are no reliable numbers. As some nations propose to take up whaling again, it is all the more important to try and carry out a census. Using video glasses and an underwater camera, it's possible to monitor them without interfering too much.
There are 2 whales. There are 2 of them. I think it's a calf. Wow, it's really young.
A rare moment. Females only raise 1 calf every 3 to 5 years. At birth, a whale calf already weighs 5 tons and gains about 100 kilos a day from its mother's milk alone. No other mother in the animal kingdom expends so much effort on childcare. It will take another 5 years until the calf is able to hunt on its own. Whaling was banned 3 decades ago in the Azores. There are still a few industry ruins to indicate the size of this operation. Thousands and thousands of whales were cooked into oil in this plant. In these boilers alone, 700 whales were cut up and melted each season, squeezing out 10,000 liters of oil per whale, which was sold to England and Germany, greasing the wheels of their industrial revolution. For the poor Azoreans, whaling was the only means to earn extra money. The whales offered little resistance. Even with bare hands, it was an unequal fight. What was the animal thinking? These images document some of the last hunting expeditions in the Azores. How many barrels of whale oil were shipped to Europe has never been calculated. But the trade books reveal an interesting detail. The yield per whale had decreased since the 1930s. No full-grown whales were left, and juveniles were hunted to fill the quota. Up to the 18th century, the harvest for sperm whales was limited to the Atlantic. When it became harder to find animals, whalers moved towards the Pacific until the 1950s, when all known sperm whale stocks were depleted. As a last resort, they extended the hunt to the Arctic. Using ever more sophisticated harpoon technologies, they could maintain their quota of 30,000 per season. On factory ships, their blubber was flensed and melted into oil, and the greasy meat was sold as pet food. When Western nations finally regulated whaling, Russian fleets continued on their own terms. It is spring in the Azores. It's time for this bull to make his way to the summer hunting grounds off Norway. It's unknown to this day where and how they navigate through the vast oceans. During their migration, the males travel 5,000 kilometers in just 3 months. It's one of the greatest navigation skills of the animal kingdom. In recent years, however, sperm whale bulls seem to have been leaving their traditional migratory routes more and more. Marine biologists are puzzled, as Florian Grane explains.
I experienced it once myself. We were on our way with a research vessel, setting over from Scotland to Norway. Coincidentally, seismic surveys for oil and gas took place at the same time. Here, for example, you can see a sperm whale jumping out of the water, which is a seldom sight. In this case, it appears to be a direct reaction to the seismic explosions. It seems to be an extreme, a crass reaction to the loud sound waves.
His observations have been on his mind since then, because at the same time, whale strandings were increasing in the North Sea. What drove these normally deep-diving whales into the shallow North Sea at a depth of only 200 meters? During the late 1980s and 90s, marine scientists in Europe noticed a sharp increase in strandings. They observed that the strandings always occurred during the winter months, which is migration time when the bulls return to their clan in the Azores. Why did they abandon their traditional route? Veterinarians try to find the answer. Laboratory analyses produce no results. The whales appeared to be healthy and in good condition. So what is it that lead these experienced wayfarers to enter the shallow North Sea waters? The whales normally travel beyond the continental shelf, but here they're changing their course toward the shallow North Sea. Since 1988, more whales are being found on Europe's coastlines. There is no common European database to date. The statistics are collected by independent biologists. What made these nomads leave their safe deep-sea route? The Earth's magnetic field did not change, nor were any special lunar or solar phases recorded. At the end of the 80s, the search for oil was intensified around the British Isles and the North Sea. To find oil, ships drag special measuring equipment through the water. It looks harmless at first glance. Huge pressure cannon produce air bubbles within milliseconds. When they collapse again, they send out huge pressure waves. Like the punch of a giant, they shake the ocean floor down to a depth of thousands of meters. The echoes reveal the possible location of oil and gas fields. These sound waves also radiate sideways and travel for thousands of kilometers through sound channels that form between water layers of the same temperature. The sperm whales have to travel through them during their migration. While extremely loud underwater, the sound is almost inaudible above the surface. Florian Grana has a suspicion. The number of strandings increased in the late 1980s, parallel to the search for oil, which was intensified in Northern Europe at the same time. The demand is increasing to learn more about these deepest diving whales. In Andenes, Norway's northernmost port, an international research expedition is about to begin. With a newly developed recording method, they want to follow the whales during their hunt in the high Arctic. If their endeavor succeeds, it will be a revolution in sperm whale research. "100 meters away, a bull is surfacing. Now they have to stay calm. A mini-computer, known as D-tag, will be attached to the back of the whale when it surfaces for air. The D-tag, attached to a 15-meter pole, was developed with military funds.
Can you get ranges still, Mark, or is this...
I think it's getting a little...
Attached by suction cups, it won't injure the whale.
Try to get right behind him, Mads. Perfect. This is exactly lined up.
Excellent. Mine is 43 UTC.
43. There's a whale up. Get a heading on that guy.
Aspect heading.
From now on, every movement and sound will be recorded. A second whale is surfacing. The same procedure begins again.
Again, 240.
Yes, and
244. What's the seconds, dude?
2:45.06.
Don't get any closer, Mads. This is good.
Never before has man been able to track a sperm whale during his hunt in the deep Arctic Sea. The D-tag will stay attached and won't release for another 24 hours. It's 2 in the morning. 10 kilometers further, team members have discovered a decaying sperm whale. The corpse must have been lying around for weeks. It's impossible to determine the cause of death at such a late stage. In 2002, 12 sperm whales and a fin whale were stranded at the same coast. At the same time, a seismic search for oil was conducted in this region. Even though the local newspaper wrote about it, no further inquiry was undertaken. Instead, the corpses were pulled out to sea and sunk with dynamite. A second team of the Andenes expedition is lowering deep-sea microphones 500 meters deep. To understand the effect of noise on the whales, the scientists need to enter their acoustic world. Using triangulation, the whales' positions and communication can be determined. But so far, no life signs. He's fluking. He's diving into the depths of the ocean. His signals are reaching the onboard control center.
He's down looking for food, and he's emitting those clicks.
Sperm whales emit extremely focused sound waves. When they hit objects with a density different from that of water, an echo is thrown back. The whales can translate these into images of their surroundings. To produce these loudest sounds in nature, he claps two huge muscles in his nasal region. The pressure wave is reflected from his skull, passes through focusing lenses made of fat, before traveling through the water at 5,400 kilometers per hour to detect potential prey. Whale watcher boats are also active in Andenes. They're also listening to the clicking sounds to find out where the whales will surface. They've come across the whale with the D tag. By now, it is early afternoon. Suddenly, a single military aircraft appears. A P-3 Orion, specialized in anti-submarine warfare.
So there was a sonar, but I'm not sure. Maybe from a submarine or the plane.
In the canyon below, an anti-submarine exercise seems to be underway.
Look at these signals, you can see that they're changing very much in amplitude. So all of a sudden down here, you have a very loud signal.
By emitting extremely loud sounds, the military try to spot hidden submarines. The whales have suddenly disappeared.
We don't want to talk about that right now because we are in a very sensitive situation about this. And we're actually trying to collaborate with the base to find the tags. We don't want to go into very much of that right now.
One thing is clear. The whales have suddenly left the area. Unfortunately, expedition leader Bertel Møhl is unwilling to comment.
But it's definitely not what we came for. And I'm not going to comment on these strange sounds out there, because they're really none of our business.
Now it's even more important to recover the mini-computer. The scientists are scanning for radio signals to detect the D-tag.
But on the other hand, the canyon is also that way. Yes. So, yeah.
Weak signals are coming in from far out. So what happened in the canyon? Why did the whales leave? Marine biologist Patrick Miller has a suspicion.
We heard from the whale watching guides that their behavior was a bit funny. that day. Of course, we had a quite loud military sonar passing by, which was pinging, probably what they call a 53 Charlie, which is incredibly loud sonar. And we could hear it on our directional hydrophones. So it's likely to be a submarine, is my guess.
The expedition suddenly takes on a new sense of purpose. Is it possible to prove how sperm whales react to noise? The detection signal points to the mini-computer.
Nice one. Yes.
So far, it's a complete success.
I want to see what data it's got. We wake it up, tell it we're here. It just sends all the data, and the programming information goes via infrared, so it issues this little... It's so thin, yeah.
It was mainly paying around 100.
And that's what's really curious.
Yeah.
So look at this layer here. I mean, it is very unusual. It's the first example we've ever seen of such shallow foragers. It's extraordinary,
Really?
actually.
Yeah.
These guys have found some kind of
But that also shows that it's worthwhile to go to different habitat with different animals to put tags. And you can argue we put tags on 50 sperm whales. These guys behave
It's always dangerous.
very, very, very different.
Right, it's always dangerous to think that you know everything about an animal.
The first analysis has been surprising, but they're still lacking the details. For this, they're collaborating with computer specialists from Berlin. In the basement of the hacker lounge, Seabase, 3D experts have developed programs that allow unusual data sets to be visualized. Millions of abstract positioning data. Now, programs have to be written to turn this wealth of data into the first authentic 3D reconstruction of a sperm whale hunt. First, the actors are modeled. Then the skeleton is linked up to the positioning data. The sperm whale's original movements were measured 5 times per second. Now his records are being transferred into a diving curve. The whale has left the canyon towards the open ocean. To understand how sperm whales use echoes for orientation, his sound beam is envisioned as a light ray. These clicks generate enough orientation for the whales to find their way around even in depths below 1,000 meters. These are the first authentic reconstructions of the supreme deep-sea hunter. Clearly audible, the military sonar roams through the canyon. The 3D programming is done. Now it's the task of the biologists to investigate the dives scientifically. Scotland. The marine biologist Patrick Miller teaches at St. Andrews University. His research interests include the estimation of surviving whales and their hunting behavior.
Because sperm whales do seem to be more abundant in areas where there is productivity, it makes sense to take the locations where we have survey data and then extrapolate that up to the global scale. The important question right now is just how many sperm whales are actually out there, especially following this long period of intense whaling activity.
Miller was a member of the DTAG expedition. This is also for him the first time to enter the new diving data. What will be uncovered about the unseen life of the titans of the deep?
So then I have an animation of this. So here's the first animal we tagged.
A world premiere is taking place. The first authentic visualization of a sperm whale hunt. In just 90 seconds, he dives to 150 meters deep.
On these deep dives that the whale looks like it actually is doing a bit more gliding on the way down, which is quite interesting.
The DTAG finally uncovers how sperm whales manage to dive so deeply. Gliding down without much effort proves he must have a similar buoyancy to that of water. Reaching 200 meters, he begins to scan his surroundings. His orientation clicks are seen here as light rays.
it starts clicking, already searching for a prey patch and making decisions about how deep to go and what kind of food to try to capture based on how it's sensing the environment.
Slowing down the recordings, the echoes of squids and rocks differ from each other. Like an acoustic torchlight, every click reveals new information. He descends at about 2 meters per second. 11 minutes later, he arrives at his hunting ground at astonishing depth.
The whale dove all the way down to about 1,600 meters, which is one of the deepest dives we ever recorded from a sperm whale.
The squid still has a chance. The whale has to keep adapting his course. Each click produces a sound pressure which feels like an actual punch.
And there, the whale switches into a buzz.
Thanks to his oxygen reserves, the whale shows the better endurance.
It turns, starts moving off to select another item to move towards for the next prey capture event. The regular clicks are slower like this. By putting out more clicks more quickly, that way the whale gets an update of how exactly its prey item might be moving. Because you can imagine in that final capture phase, every little detail counts.
His click rate speeds up to 30 per second. Then, silence again.
So the rapid updating in the last phase of the capture is the most important.
With their sensitive ears, faintest echoes provide enough orientation in this otherwise pitch-black environment.
Which is the same thing you see in bats. A very different animal is also producing those kinds of buzzes when it goes in for the capture of a moth. Do the same thing across very different animals using echolocation. You see these zigzagging motions, which is what we usually see in the foraging phase of a dive.
One hunt follows the next, about every minute, which proves that it is not one gigantic battle with the giant squid, but many small catches that he makes. Already 7 minutes at 1,500 meters, the D-tag accurately records behavior which could never be filmed before. The military sonar. No obvious panic reaction is visible. Also, the second tagged whale stays focused on his prey. Are all concerns exaggerated after all? Then something unusual happens.
It's coming up to breathe, but it's actually clicking on the way up. And in a quite close location, we tagged another whale, but you can see that it's doing the same thing. And most sperm whales would stop clicking as soon as they start to come up. And at the same time, they both switch from deep diving to shallow diving. The sperm whales are actually foraging here at 100 meters deep, which is, it's actually the shallowest that we've ever seen from any of our tag data.
But the whale misses and doesn't seem to care. During the next 4 hours, they sidetrack 20 kilometers.
No doubt they're also listening to each other and trying to pick up what they can.
Similar shallow dives were observed by whalers as typical flight behavior. But this analysis delves no further into the sonar issue. Are they missing a rare opportunity? When the Navy plane appeared before, the entire expedition was at stake. The whale safari also complained, as they had to move out much further to catch up to the whales, behaving slightly different at the surface.
If they take shallow dive, then normally, because we go too close, but in this moment it takes shallow dive 3, 4, 5 times, and this is not normal.
Necessary data and evidence was recorded and retrieved. So why have they dedicated so little research effort on the sonar itself? Due to the division of the analysis work, it was not Patrick Miller's job to lead this work task.
The signal-to-noise ratio was quite good.
The thing, I think you have to be quite systematic about it.
Valeria Telloni was appointed to carry out the main analysis work. She later claimed not to have detected a single sign of military operation within the recordings. She is directly funded by the military. Whales simply seem to like to hunt shallow sometimes, was her conclusion. "6,000 kilometers further, the hunting ground of another sperm whale clan sadly gained fame. They used to forage for months exactly where the BP oil platform blew up. An estimated 780 million liters gushed out directly into their deep-sea habitat. 2 months later, an area the size of Portugal was covered by the toxic crude. Millions of liters of a highly toxic dispersant are sprayed to sink the reddish oil out of sight below the surface, where it affects the entire food web, forming poisonous clouds which linger down below. The whales seem to have left in time. But this is not the first oil industry-related problem in this region, which is why also here an investigation took place to detect possible impacts.
In the Gulf of Mexico, we were studying the effects of seismic so that we could see in more detail how the behavior of the whale either related or didn't relate to the sounds.
And bearing is 320.
This time, the DTAG detects a behavior which was hardly understood before.
We can see that it's just sitting motionless, bobbing in the water, because if it were swimming, it couldn't stay vertical like this.
The DTAG data seemed to provide an answer for this odd behavior.
And let's just zoom in on that and try to see better what's going on during that particular dive.
For over 30 minutes, there are no movements, no sounds. This seems to be their posture of deep relaxation.
After letting it record for a while, we asked a seismic airgun company to come by close to the whale.
This is the same noisy oil exploration technology that might be connected to atypical strandings in the North Sea, but this time applied with care.
We asked them to go ahead and ramp up, and so this is a half-hour period where they gradually add one air gun, then the next air gun, until all of them were going, so that we could see in more detail how the behavior of the whale either related or didn't relate to the sounds.
The whale shall get a head start, but what is the chance for a slow-moving animal to escape? Sound travels at more than 5,000 kilometers per hour in water.
If we look in more detail, so now the whale's been just drifting along, head up, what look like completely normal resting dives, even though the seismic airgun sounds coming in quite steadily.
Whales hear through special channels in their lower jaw. Perhaps this one has taken up a protective posture, understanding that it is useless to even try to outpace these tremendous blasts. He stayed for 5 hours in rigor.
But we see this kind of interesting thing at the end, that the airgun sounds stop, and just after that, the whale stops resting and instead starts going on a deep dive. Well, we have to ask the question, what might be the reason why the whale changed its behavior so close in time to the end of the airgun sound? And the probability that that's just due to chance is pretty low. So any loud sound that's produced by people is a concern, and we should be worried about how it might affect sperm whales or any other kind of whale or other animals in the ocean, even not whales.
But do these findings provide also clues for the increasing strandings in the North Sea? Or do whales behave differently in different regions?
A whale in the Gulf of Mexico has heard these sounds before, but to scientifically demonstrate whether or not a sound has an effect on a whale is quite a difficult job. Maybe people are actually more concerned about what's happening on the bigger scale of the lifetime of the animals. So we really need to have a new generation of people, researchers, who can understand complex data like this to help us to answer these questions.
Miller's investigation into the seismic impact was unfortunately put to an end, and there are still open questions concerning the military sonar. One of the sea base specialists is taking another look at the dive. Every successful hunt is marked as a ball. At a depth of 1,500 meters, the whale catches prey every 2 minutes. But at 200 meters, catches are incredibly rare. Whalers were already aware that sperm whales dived shallow when they were fleeing. Were these whales trying to escape? It took 10 hours for this bull to calm down. Then it started to dive normally again. But when did the unusual dive start? Back to the beginning. The analysis reveals that right after the sonar hits the whale, he starts diving away horizontally. Were the whales unable to bear the noise? If this was the case, this could explain why the whales are leaving their normal migration routes, trying to avoid the loud oil-searching ships. Whale research is largely financed by both the military and the oil industry, an alliance that threatens critical research. If sperm whales perceive the sound as noise, it affects them as it would a human being, as painful and stressful. The deep sea has long stopped being a quiet place. Whales evolved in comparatively quiet oceans. But the rapid industrialization of the oceans by humans hasn't given these highly developed animals the chance to adapt acoustically. Brain researcher Helmut Oehlschläger is fascinated by the whale's extremely sensitive hearing. This is the first time the brain of a sperm whale is shown to the public. To the left, the 10-kilogram brain of a sperm whale. To the right, the 1.5-kilogram brain of a human, a dolphin and a river dolphin.
The ridges of the sperm whale brain are maximally developed. This is not found anywhere else. It suggests high computational capacity. A whale, in particular a sperm whale, seems to possess a high sensitivity associated with this cerebral cortex. In comparison, the human brain has cortex areas that are similarly organized but different. This is the frontal brain. Here's the temporal cortex with the auditory cortex for hearing. Here's the acoustic nerve fiber of the human brain. And here's where it is in the whale's brain. The facial nerve is also bigger, which controls facial expressions. This makes sense because he has to control his blowhole at the front of his nose to generate his complex sonar signals. To accommodate this, a bigger brain with a larger surface helps.
The acoustic nerve fibers of both whales and dolphins are 10 times larger than that of humans. An unwritten law of neuroscience is the larger a brain areal, the more complex information it is able to process.
This is the acoustic area of the dolphin's brain. And since the brain of a sperm whale has a similar structure to that of a dolphin's, it is likely that the acoustic area would be here.
All mammal brains generally share the same architecture. The sperm whale has the largest brain that ever evolved in the history of evolution.
These are extrapolations from dolphins, where we have more knowledge. However, we still know too little about sperm whales.
Helmut Oehrischläger compares brain cells of a human cortex to those of a sperm whale. Left, human. Right, sperm whale. There are some differences, like in the fourth layer, but in general the cortex is made up of identical cell types. Our cortex consists of 6 layers of cells, which all communicate with each other. But the reaction to extreme noise is governed by the emotional system. Knowledge about the anatomy of emotions in whales is still limited. The brain in the bucket. Helmut Oehrischläger is on a visit to the University Hospital in Göttingen. Michael Knaut is the neuroradiologist of the team. Employing the magnetic resonance scanner, they hope to get a deeper insight into the emotional system.
What are these concentric circles? They look like convolution artifacts.
There are some mistakes, not easily explainable. Another attempt is made. Now they have to wait.
What do you think? Do they perceive their surroundings with their ears? That's what I think. Like blind people, they create an acoustic map of their surroundings. I like to compare it to air traffic control radars, where one can get a constant update on the changing positions so that they can get a complete picture. There it is. There it is.
Finally, the magnetic waves created a millimeter-precise picture of the brain.
Here you can see how incredibly wrinkled his brain is, far more than a human brain.
The neuroscientists have waited 20 years to get such a view of a sperm whale brain. Even the experts are stunned by the intricacies of the brain.
Also, the acoustic representation is highly defined. It extends over a large cortex area. This far surpasses the proportions of the human brain.
Sperm whales receive sound from the water through their lower jaw. From there, the sound spreads across the canals to the acoustic cortex. But the emotional evaluation takes place elsewhere. The limbic structures, which are responsible for the emotions, lie deeper in the brain.
This is now the area of the limbic cortex. Just like in other mammals, it's part of the limbic system and it's responsible for learning processes and for emotions.
That's
the amygdala.
The amygdala, shown in yellow here, is the brain's alarm center. If noises are too loud or too irritating, they trigger an alarm throughout the body. Then there's no going back. As with human beings, it triggers a cascade of stress hormones. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the entire whale in just seconds. The body shuts down the immune system, mobilizes all its reserves, and the huge heart begins to beat faster. The stress-triggered flight takes place.
So kann man sich zumindest ganz gut erklären, dass
This
die
explains
Amygdala
very
hier
well
eben
why the
besonders
amygdala takes up
großen
such a
Raum
large
einnimmt.
space here.
Sperm whales are dependent on quiet ocean surroundings also for a different reason. Depending on the geographical conditions of the area, they develop different hunting techniques. Back to Scotland, where ethnologists are exploring behavior and communication patterns.
In a way, it's a parallel to what humans do. Like some fishermen might specialize in fishing using nets. Other fishermen might specialize at fishing using pots for lobster, like this one.
The research team at St. Andrews is investigating how different hunting strategies have been developed by different clans. A bay close to the laboratory gives an idea why whale cultures have evolved independently of each other.
So if you imagine this is the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico over there, and the Mediterranean Sea over here, they would kind of be isolated by these land masses. Some behaviors developing in the Atlantic would have difficulties expanding into the Mediterranean because they're so isolated. When people hunt, they usually go for the bigger whales. They might have a better knowledge of how to explore their surroundings. If you lose this knowledge, the group might be losing its ability to survive.
How much of this whale knowledge might be lost forever after man has been harvesting the most mature and experienced whales for centuries? What can we still learn from those remaining whale cultures which have managed to survive? Ricardo Atunes and his team have looked into these cultures.
As an example of how sperm whales might have different foraging cultures, let's say these are 2,000 meters, and whales might come all the way down and forage close to the bottom, or they might forage at mid-water, or they might even go into a shelf and forage at 200 meters of water.
The whales of the Azores have specialized in chasing along the nutrient-rich slopes of the mid-Atlantic ridge. They communicate in a rhythm of clicks, which is why they are referred to as the +2 clan. In the Pacific, a clan has cultivated a different strategy. They hunt in deep-sea currents. They share their necessary knowledge in a different rhythm. Even more astonishing is a clan living in the Gulf of Mexico, which is where the warm Gulf Stream originates. They've learned to hunt within gigantic upwellings, where masses of food can be found. Each of the deep basins of the world's oceans is home to up to 10,000 sperm whales. Despite being of the same species, they've developed different languages. But to this day, researchers are confused about these rhythms, which at first glance look so simple. Subtle rhythmic changes within the clicks might carry the secrets of the deep sea. The International Whaling Commission banned commercial whale hunting in 1986. However, the Japanese government has continued to support whale hunting in the name of science. Minke whales and also sperm whales are on their list. One justification is that whales are depleting their fish stocks. However, in light of the globalized fishing fleets, this argument is hardly justifiable. In particular because the whales are often victims of the drift nets. Japanese whaling has been declared as scientific research. But already out at sea, the whale meat is packaged and sent directly to the fish markets. The meat from the remote Antarctic waters is considered non-contaminated and therefore healthy. The Japanese public, however, are becoming critical. According to surveys, 70% of the Japanese are against the continuation of whaling. Despite public opinion, the Japanese whaling lobby continually tries to overrule the international whaling ban. Although they have come close, they have not yet managed to succeed.
We think that the JAPA program that the Japanese have developed is a sham, a fraud. It's about commercial whaling in all but name, and the outcome has been 7,000 dead whales.
The purpose of our whaling programs bows down more to economical than to scientific goals.
Even though Toshio Kazuya, one of the founders of the Japanese scientific whaling program, and other colleagues are starting to doubt its scientific value, each fall the whaling fleet puts out to sea. The official claim is they want to examine the whales to understand the effects of global climate change. However, modern methods have long been developed to monitor whale stocks without killing them. Biopsies taken for genetic and chemical analysis would be sufficient. Could this also be an act of defiance against the perceived exaggerated animal-loving West? Back at the Azores, whaling was banned here a quarter of a century ago. It is as if the animals can sense this. They've started coming back closer to the shore. This bull has completed his long journey to the Arctic hunting grounds. In search of new oil fields, we are entering further and further into the habitat of these nomads. Will it ultimately be the noise of our civilization that will threaten their continued existence? The more secrets these ocean giants reveal, the more unique they seem. Perhaps scientists will even manage to decode their clicks in the future. It's a language that we still have yet to understand.